Okay, welcome everybody. Bienvenue à notre session ce soir. Welcome to Weaving the Strands, the interconnectedness of FSL learning. This is phase 3 of the FSL Teacher Recruitment and Retention Module Project funded by the Ontario Ministry of Education. These modules have been created with the OMLTA, the Ontario Modern Languages Teachers Association, in partnership with the MLC, the Modern Languages Council. This third series of modules is going to examine how the curriculum strands of listening, speaking, reading, and writing are interconnected but distinct. These 4 modules will emphasize that students need multiple opportunities to listen and respond to texts and to others, to speak and interact with others, to read, view, and respond to a variety of texts, and to write a variety of texts for many different purposes and audiences. Effective instructional strategies and tools that support the FSL curriculum, learner engagement, differentiation, equity, diversity, and inclusion will be outlined and shared. Each of these 4 modules contains its own viewer's guide, video, and webinar, which you are at tonight. Welcome. A facilitator's module will be created to support this work, and everything is going to be available on OMLTA's website as well as YouTube channel. I also encourage you to hop on to Twitter and follow along. We are live now, so the instructions are up on the screen if you search for hashtag OMLTA on Twitter and join the live chat. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to leave you with our presenters now, Annette Galliano and Amy Turner, and they are going to lead us in our evening webinar on listening. So bienvenue à tout le monde, and you're off.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're very excited to be with you here tonight. My name is Amy Turner, and I am an FSL curriculum lead for FSL with Upper Grand District School Board. And I have with me my colleague.
Hello,
Annette.
I'm Annette Galliano, and I'm a French as second language educator with Halton Catholic. So welcome everyone, and we're really excited to get started.
So as we get started with our introduction, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know what school board you're with. You can even let us know what position or grade or division that you work with. That just helps us know who's in the room and helps you make some connections with some other people that are here tonight. Thank you. Great, bonjour. And Annette, I'll get you to go to the next slide as people are starting to populate. Welcome, everyone. Lots of variety and grade levels that we have and different positions that people are in. It's great. We want to start tonight with land acknowledgement. We want to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we are learning synchronously on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land, which we each call home. And we know that we're all joining from different geographical areas. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous people and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. I'm going to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I'm joining from today, and I would invite you, as I do that, and Annette is going to as well, to reflect on where you are and to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each in our own way move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I am joining today from Elora, Ontario, and it is on land that is part of the Halaman Tract. This was land that was promised to the Haudenosaunee people of the Six Nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. As a settler, and I use the term settler to acknowledge that I recognize that I have benefited from the colonial actions of the past where land was seized from its original occupants. I am grateful for the access that I have to the Grand River and the Irvine River to enjoy the beauty of the land, especially right now with the beautiful colors of the fall leaves, and to spend that time with my family in this space. In this gratitude, I also accept my role as a settler to help disrupt the colonial narrative by listening, learning, and taking action towards reconciliation.
And hello, everyone. I'm joining you today from the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And as part of my action towards reconciliation, I am looking to do more learning on Treaty 14, which includes the lands along the North Shore of Lake Ontario as part of my commitment to reconciliation.
Thanks, Annette. So we're going to get started with our module. As Jordan mentioned, tonight we are focusing on the listening strand. We will explore the listening strand of the FSL curriculum documents in order to develop language proficiency and confidence for our learners. This module will address possible barriers present for educators and learners while participating in listening activities. It will also discuss concrete instructional strategies that will help learners develop listening and interaction skills. So we're hoping to interact together to do some modeling of what some of those activities might look like. We're going to encourage some participation as well. So we hope you'll be able to join us in that as we get started.
All right, so to get started, we're going to talk about our confidence in listening as educators. So we want to get started to see where everyone was in their listening journeys as educators. And as you can see, there is a mountain. And the question is, où êtes-vous dans votre parcours de l'enseignement de la compréhension orale? And there are 3 different levels. You could be au camp de base, or à mi-chemin, or maybe your listening skills for teaching are at the au sommet. So we ask you that, and Amy will be populating the links in the chat, that we have a Jamboard, and I'm assuming Amy will use probably 2 Jamboards. What do you think?
Yes, perfect. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Excellent. So we will use 2 Jamboards, and I'll go to one of them right now. And we ask that you take a little sticky note and you place your sticky note where you find yourself on the mountain. But at the same time, explain why you think your listening development for teaching is at that level. So this is the time to, it's all anonymous. This is the time to really be truthful to yourself. Oh, where are you in teaching listening with your classes? And where you would like improvement? What are you looking for? So that's what we ask. Just take a little sticky note and you will populate it where necessary. So for example, maybe you could be au camp de base because you do not know of any effective listening resources to use with learners. And please feel free, you can write in any language as you wish. And you can take your sticky note of where you are. I'm going to put myself on this end as an example. So we'll give a couple of minutes for that. And Amy, for classifying, I'm thinking maybe if your last name is A to M for this one. And I believe you put in the chat, Amy, for the second one too.
I did. Yep, they're all ready to go.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. So I'll just be staying on the first one. Unfortunately, I won't go into the second Jamboard.
And I'll have a look at it too.
Perfect. So I'm seeing some great commentary. A lot of honesty, which is fantastic. And we really hope that from this session that you'll be able to gain some more confidence in your teaching of listening. I like this one. Many years of experience, but always looking for new ideas. A continual learner. That's wonderful. Amy, do you find anything interesting on the second Jamboard? Maybe a comment you would like to say?
Yeah, I'm seeing some similar ideas to what we're seeing on the first one. Access to resources can sometimes be a barrier, and knowing how to select resources that meet the needs of students. People that feel like they have some strategies, but excited to learn more strategies. which hopefully will be able to help with that. And I'm just leaning in to see the small sticky notes. Another barrier can be sometimes the purchase of resources. So I think we're going to share some sites that are useful for finding things too.
That's fantastic. So I'll just go back to the slide. Oops. There we go. And thank you everyone for your participation. We have a pretty jam-packed hour, so we are going fairly quickly, but please feel free to, again, continue with where your journey is on the mountain. But for now, we would just like to talk about our listening goals. And for our session goals, not only today, but there are also video modules on our YouTube channel, so the OMLTA's YouTube. So please feel free to check out our video module for Module 1 listening, where we go in detail of our session goals, and also we present several useful strategies for everyone for listening. But for today, and also in our video module, which you can check out on YouTube, we're going to examine the importance of listening so that we can support learners in developing confidence to become effective communicators. We are identifying possible challenges present for educators and learners while participating in listening activities to overcome these barriers to increase engagement and comprehension. We are also exploring pre-listening, during listening, and post-listening instructional strategies so that we can support learners in understanding and interpreting a variety of spoken French texts and conversations. And finally, we are describing ways that promote equity, diversity, inclusion, and culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, CRRP, in listening, so that we can help educators meet the needs of learners and critically choose authentic texts that represent diverse voices of la francophonie.
Annette, I'm just noticing that bar has crept down a little bit. If you can move it, I don't know if you have control to be able to move it up.
Here, let's see if I can try to move that a little bit. Unfortunately, that bar is not moving.
Okay, it's not totally blocking it off.
Okay, so now what we're going to do, just to get everyone well adjusted into listening, is we have a video to share with everyone. And in this video, maybe some of you have already seen it. We're presenting Joey from Friends, and he wants to audition to a play. However, there is something very particular that he has to do. So he has a tutor with him to help him pronounce words. So let's observe what happens about the skills for Joey in trying to listen to speak in French.
Simple. Your first line is, my name is Claude. So just repeat after me. Je m'appelle Claude.
Je te coupe plow.
Let's try it again.
Okay.
Je m'appelle Claude.
Je te plie blue.
Huh. It's not quite what I'm saying.
Really? Sounds exactly the same to me.
Does? Really?
Yeah.
All right, let's just try it again.
Okay.
Really listen.
Got it.
Je m'appelle Claude.
Je te flou flee.
Oh, mon Dieu.
Oh, de fouf.
So I hope everyone enjoyed the clip, but in all seriousness, the reason why we showed you this clip is it's clear that unfortunately Joey can't communicate in French. But why? It's simple. Listening is the first stage in learning a new language. So he can't speak it until he can understand how to listen to it and use effective skills.
So on this slide, you will see a quotation that's taken right from the front matter of the curriculum, and it's in both the elementary and the secondary curriculum. And when we think about listening skills, it is a really complex multi-level process that involves a number of skills. So while it might seem simple when Phoebe is saying the words and just repeating back, there are a lot of things that are going on as we try to interpret the sounds and then make meaning from the sounds and then be able to repeat back. So we do need to support learners with those pieces to break it down to help them to go from recognizing a speech signal to comprehending meaning. And we need listening to communicate. This connects to the interaction and speaking so that we can have conversations. So it's really important when we look at this quote for that importance of daily opportunities to practice listening. I know a lot of people mentioned in their check-in that they're trying to incorporate listening on a regular basis. And that's really important to just give the learners exposure to that input so that they become more confident and can reuse those strategies to get better and better at it. And our brains are wired to pick up language through listening. That's how we learn the first language that we speak and how we acquire language. So thinking of that process for our learners as well. If you think of it that way, that can help us with what we're doing in the classroom. The last thing I just wanted to mention about the curriculum, and it's mentioned in this quote here, but if you look at the prompts in the listening curriculum, it gives us very specific ideas for the type of listening that's appropriate for the grade and proficiency levels of our students. So sometimes when we're selecting resources and trying to figure out what to use, doesn't necessarily mean that students will understand every single thing that they hear in the resource that you're selecting, but the types of things we're doing with the resource and the types or the lengths of the resources that we're choosing will all help to support learners with improving their listening skills. So we wanted to take a moment, and some barriers were already listed as far as the teacher, thinking from a teacher perspective when we were checking in with where you were feeling maybe with your listening skills and what things might be getting in the way of you moving up to that next level of confidence with teaching listening. We wanted you to think a little bit about the learners in front of you. And we're going to use another Jamboard here. So I think, are we still good for numbers with 2, Annette? Just because I can't see.
Yes, 2 Jamboards would be fine.
Okay, so we'll use the same thing as last time, A to M for the first Jamboard and N to Z for the second. And I'll put those links in. So I want you to think about in terms of, this is an empathy map that we're using here. What, if you put yourselves in the perspective of students, what are they hearing when they're doing a listening activity? What are they thinking, or how are they feeling? Maybe even what they're saying, because sometimes they really like to let us know how they feel when they're doing a listening activity. And even maybe what are they seeing? So just we're going to start to get some of those ideas populated, and then that will connect to our next activity. So both Jamboards are there. And we're trying, just so that the reason we have 2 is because we can't have more than 50 people on a Jamboard, I believe, or it kicks you out. So that's why we're doing 2. So we'll give you about 4 minutes or so to put on some ideas. What are students hearing? What are they thinking and feeling? What are they saying, doing? And what do they see? Just think about a time that you've done a listening activity. So I'm starting to see some ideas there. I like that. That I often think of that, the teacher from Peanuts, that wah, 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 wah. It's not, not making sense to them, or even the example with Joey, where it doesn't, that the words aren't, we can't make meaning from the words. Yeah, we often hear, I didn't understand any of that. Feeling nervous, afraid that they will embarrass themselves. So that willingness to take a risk sometimes to try when they're not understanding all of it. Yep, exactly. They might see subtitles possibly if you're using that as a strategy. Les gestes, images, expression, all of those things help. Yes, now that we're mask-free, that's also helpful as well. And then things that they're hearing. There's a comment about the speed of words being spoken. Yes, definitely that can impact how the student can process what they're hearing. They might also, there's a good strategy there, looking for the keywords and the words that they hear often to help them make meaning. That's great. Stressed, frightened. Yeah. Responding in English sometimes. Yes, that can be a coping mechanism as well. Yeah, and sometimes distracted, sometimes also taking notes. Yes, definitely.
These are great contributions.
I like that point there, focusing on what they don't know rather on what they know, and then maybe thinking about how we can help support that, focusing on what they actually can hear, because sometimes I think they think, and sometimes it's the way that we approach listening, that it's right or wrong, that it's a test, and if they don't understand everything, that can be a barrier to just feeling like they can take those risks and feeling comfortable taking risks. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and you have identified already barriers that exist for students in listening. I'm going to comment on the quote in the middle in a moment, but I wanted to highlight this resource, Listening to Learn, that's on the Transforming FSL website, that speaks about some of the barriers that are there for listening, and you identified a lot of those. The speed, sometimes the accent, or the register of the registre of the language that's being spoken. Sometimes it can be whether they have any supports with them. So someone mentioned if there's visuals, or if there's les gestes, or if there's subtitles, those things can impact whether they can make meaning. If they have a purpose for listening, if they know why they're listening, if there's something that sets up so that they have an area to focus on, even as simple as what are the key words that you're hearing, or knowing the topic and what prior knowledge they have about the topic. All of those things can affect how difficult a listening task is for students. The other challenging thing is that everyone experiences listening a little bit differently. So the perception of difficulty might not be the same for all students, and just acknowledging that with students and helping them understand that is important. Same as strategies, not all strategies work the same for all students. So helping them see that can help to alleviate some of that stress and anxiety that you talked about, that nervousness, to know that each person learns differently. There were a couple other points that I just wanted to comment on. One of the things that can be really difficult about listening compared to reading comprehension is that we can't control, the listener can't control the pace or speed of the text. That's controlled by the speaker and not the listener. So that adds to those cognitive demands for processing. And I noticed someone has just mentioned learning disabilities can also impact ability to learn, and even that time, that processing time, and then being able to recall the information those can all impact how much we understand. The other thing is that oral texts are often less linear, and especially when we're listening to a conversation that's informal and more spontaneous, the topics can be unpredictable. So it's harder to make those predictions to help us make meaning. So that's why it's really important to regularly practice listening as an active skill so that we can build learner confidence in understanding what is heard with different types of texts. And the instructional practices that we use can help to reduce some of those barriers so that we can build learner confidence and proficiency in listening. And the other thing then with that listening is that we are then providing input that will help to improve speaking and writing as well. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Amy. That was great. And thanks everyone for participating in our empathy board. So our next stage, we're looking at developing listening skills. We're going to talk about pre-listening, during listening, and post-listening examples using an actual authentic task that we're going to be modeling together. And again, just as another side points, which I mentioned already, for detailed information about pre-listening, during listening, and post-listening strategies that you can use, please check out our video module on the OMLTA YouTube channel for details. Because of the timing, we're just going to go into one or so examples for each of the phases of pre, during, and post-listening. So let's have a look at our sample task. It's a sample action-oriented task. And for those who aren't familiar with the action-oriented approach, Transforming FSL has a great guide to explain that for all FSL teachers about how the action-oriented approach can be applied in classrooms. So for our task this evening, we are going to be looking at our learning goal. And that is that nous apprenons à interagir avec les autres à propos de notre vie. Par exemple, notre famille, école, nourriture, passe-temps, etc. So we're going to talk about interacting about a familiar topic, our life, which is can include family, school, food, and our hobbies, for instance. And for success criteria in the classroom environment, the success criteria should be co-created with students. So we've just given some sample success criteria that you could possibly come up with your class if you choose to do this activity with your learners. So we have some samples such as je peux comprendre les paroles des autres. So can they actually understand what someone is telling them about their life? Je peux réagir aux idées des autres. Not only understand, but give a reaction about something similar or something that they like about what the person said. Je peux faire des comparaisons. C'est pareil, c'est différent. So about making those connections. Oh, c'est pareil, c'est différent. What's similar to their life? What's similar to someone else's life that they know of, and what is different? And finally, another sample criteria, je peux donner des opinions. What did you like about what you heard? What did you not like about it? So just some idea to get everyone started.
So we wanted to just put a context of where that listening might fit in, for instance. So we wanted to give that background to see how that how this activity might build into leading to an end goal of learners being able to have a conversation with someone else.
Exactly. And we're going to walk everyone through the steps, starting with pre-listening.
So with this, we're going to model an activity for you right now. We have some images that are from the video that we're going to watch and the title of the video, which is along the right-hand side, Sa passion la rumba. And in this, in the video that we're going to watch, we want you to make some predictions by looking at the pictures and by looking at the title. What do you think she's going to discuss? Qu'est-ce qu'elle va discuter selon vous? And you can just put some ideas in the chat. Looking at the pictures, what do you think she might discuss? Alors, favorite foods, la nourriture. sa routine, peut-être, la nourriture, sa culture, son environnement. Excellent. La rumba, habiter en Afrique. L'école, où elle vit un jour typique. Marcher à l'école. Excellent. And with this, we've got some vocabulary that's starting to I can't think of the English word, come out, sort. And that's where we might ask some more questions. So I see clothing there. Then I might ask students, quel vêtement est-ce que vous voyez? Ou quelle est la nourriture que tu vois? Est-ce que tu préfères une description? And that's a really good way to activate prior knowledge and bring out some of that vocabulary that they might hear. It also gives us as educators a good idea of if there's something that is not coming out, is there some vocab that we might need to pre-teach because they're not using those words? And so could we incorporate some of that vocab into our pre-discussion so that we know that they've got that ready there to help when they need to activate to listen and understand. Another thing, instead of the pictures, I just did screenshots and put them in. So you could also watch the video with the sound off and then have students make those predictions in that same way.
That's fantastic, Amy. Thanks. So now we're going to do a sample modeling activity together. After we had the pre-listening, we're now going to go on to during listening. So for during listening, we do want to mention that when considering your resources to choose, there are a bunch of criteria that you can keep in mind to make sure that the resource is as effective and also as diverse and culturally responsive as possible. So we just have some sample resource selection considerations from our video module. So when we were choosing this resource, we've chose it from a YouTube series called Ils ont ton âge, and I'll introduce it a little later on. But just as the brief introduction, we have this learner over here. She's 12 years old, and she comes from La République démocratique du Congo. So we also have a cool geography and intercultural understanding connection with this text. However, something else to consider is that when you are looking at resources, it's always important that a culture is portrayed in a positive light, that it just makes the culture really be positive and promoted and not anything negative about the culture, because you want people to feel affirmed about what they are listening to. So these are our considerations, and also, of course, age appropriate, content appropriate, that it will be on an individual basis, depending on the grades and levels that you are teaching. And more information, again, can be found on our video modules. I am just going to probably move on to our during listening activity that we will be doing together. So during listening, an activity that you can do with learners is that they can complete a graphic organizer. For this activity, we don't have a Jamboard for this one. We are asking you, just for different modes of participation, is to grab your own piece of paper, or you can just grab a Word document or Google Doc online and to really copy out this graphic organizer, imagining that you are the learner and you are filling out the table based on 3 of the themes that we talked about from the pre-listening, what we think the listening activity will be about: la famille, l'école, et les passe-temps. When completing the activity with learners, they can do it in small groups. Again, depends on the style that you would like to portray. It can be in partners, it could be individually. And if you are thinking of completing this in small groups, it could technically be groups of 3, where each learner is responsible to cover a different category. Or it could be partners, where each partner is responsible for a different category. just so that is scaffolded and that the listening activity is more manageable for all learners. So that's really our objective, and is open. Educators know their learners best. So there are many modifications that can be done with the graphic organizer to ensure that all learners feel that they can be successful in the activity. So as soon as everyone has their paper or their virtual paper already with the graphic organizer, we're going to model the activity together by listening to the video clip from our friend whose name is Kate, from the Democratic Republic du Congo, and we will fill out the graphic organizer. So Amy, I'm going to get started on playing it. I think everyone should have their paper or their online materials all set. And our categories again, we have la famille, la nourriture, et les passe-temps.
École.
École, pardon, did I say la nourriture? I must be hungry. Famille, école et passe-temps. Merci, Amy.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Kate Boeki, j'ai 12 ans, en nom de Kinshasa, République démocratique du Congo. Ici, c'est ma cour, je vis ici avec ma famille. Elle, c'est ma grand-mère, ma maman, mon frère, ma cousine, mes amis. Maman, osa bien. On vient de parler avec ma mère, le lingala. Ça veut dire tu vas bien. Elle a répondu je vais bien ma fille. On part à la cuisine. Je me présente ma tante Fifi. Elle prépare le dongo. Il y a la tomate, l'oignon, l'ail et le poisson. Là, c'est mon école. Je vais tous les après-midi avec mon frère. Voilà. Aujourd'hui, j'ai un cours d'éducation à la vie. On apprend le savoir-faire.
Un se fait à l'intérieur et l'autre agit par l'intelligence et le cœur. Ça va?
Là, on est dans la salle de classe. On est 70. Mon cours préféré, c'est le français et la musique. J'aime bien aller à l'école parce que j'apprends de nouvelles choses. Je vois mes amis, on joue, je vois mon petit frère et puis on rentre à la maison. Après l'école, on se retrouve ici avec mes amis. On chante et on danse la rumba congolaise. La rumba, c'est un genre de musique traditionnelle et ça se danse avec les pieds et les hanches. C'est ma chanson préférée, la rumba. Je les chante aussi avec mon frère. La rumba, c'est une passion. Pour moi, j'aime danser, j'aime chanter, mais plus tard, je serai docteur. Venez danser avec nous en RDC. J'espère que ça vous a plu. À la prochaine fois. Merci.
Wow, that was so for the activity. I hope everyone enjoyed the video. You can see how Kate presents herself and it's just so wonderful. So for the activity, just because of timing, obviously with your learners, you could repeat the video several times, not just for one, not just one time. And Amy, I wanted to mention something that's really cool that we noticed about multilingual learning.
Yeah, just when we were selecting this video, there were a couple of things that we thought it was a good representation of. To me, it really spoke to, if you've read Zaretta Hammond's book on cultivating genius, the the framework for CRP, including joy. It really was present in this video in the way that Kate shared about her culture, and the fact that it even includes the Gali language. So we have that valuing of the two languages. It's also important when we're selecting videos that we're not always choosing videos that represent one culture, like France, which often tends to happen because la francophonie is very diverse, and we want to show that representation in our classes. And then there was one other thing I was going to say, but it's totally gone.
That's okay. And then just about the activity, just for timing, we're not going to have participants share what they filled out for la famille, l'école, et les passe-temps, but because we're just modeling. But in the classroom, there are a couple of ways of how that can be shared in the class. So actually, I'll probably go on to the next slide so I can explain it better. So am I on the right? Yes, I'm on the right slide, I think. So for example, for the activity, after the learners completed the activity, there could be a penser, parler, partager, which is a think, pair, share, where learners can reflect on what they filled out. They can then talk about it with an elbow partner, and then some can also share it with the class. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a moment because there was a question in the chat about how the graphic organizer would be used. And then we had a great suggestion from a participant that said, if you're thinking about your learners, maybe they're listening for how many times they heard that target word. You could also use it for that category. So what words did you hear associated with the category of family? Students that are maybe more proficient in the language might write down some of the details that they heard about when she was describing her family. So you can vary that graphic organizer depending on the level of the students and what you want them to listen for.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And then just at the debrief, so that we can go on to our post-listening, the debrief is how might this activity help support and scaffold listening for learners? So I know that we had some talk right now, but if anyone has any other contribution ideas, please feel free to input that in the chat about how it could be supporting listening for our learners. Any other ideas?
I just want to add that we just selected famille, école, passe-temps because we predicted some of the things that you might have come up with from the pictures. You might have more categories depending on your learners based on all of those answers that they gave. Like maybe that's what they're listening for based on the predictions. So it's really versatile in how you use it. And I'm seeing some answers come into the chat too for other ideas as well. Some vocab could be pre-introduced and then sorted to the chart as they listen for it. Definitely love that.
Yes, and we do have a question about if it's a French only class. I would do you suggest explain in English? It depends on the level of your learners and also where they're at. I do suggest, if it's a French only class, to really use French and to use prompts, actions, gestures to help convey the messaging. But French would be more preferred than English, because then the students will probably go back to English rather than trying to advance their French skills in a French only class. So it is encouraged to use French.
And sometimes it's modeling that and doing maybe an example with them that helps to show how it works. And when Annette mentioned doing it more than once too, I often find after one listening, having students compare some of the things they wrote down, that can also help some of those misconceptions. Sometimes if a student has misunderstood and once they share with other people, then the second time they listen, they can listen for some of those ideas they discussed together as part of helping to get some meaning from it. My students struggle with confidence. I always show videos without sound first so they can focus on content and make predictions. Exactly. Yeah, that's a great strategy. Because then they're getting a bit familiar with that content that's there, and it gives them a focus for listening. Tammy, I also like your suggestion that repetition of what you're using is helpful for students, because then they get used to those routines, and that also helps to consolidate the information. Great ideas. Awesome.
That's fantastic. Amy, I think we should probably go on to our post listening, but please feel free to continue to contribute in the chat.
So using this activity for post listening, after students have listened a couple times, there might be a whole group activity then where we create a model for our students with what's on there. So we just put a couple examples here. So maybe if we were working on describing, we might have we might have come up, or students might share, and I'd write that model on the board. Elle a une mère. Elle aime danser. Elle aime chanter, for instance. So that we start to have a model of the sentence structure that they're reading, that they can then maybe reproduce orally, that they can then write. And then to have students interact and be active with that, we might first do an activity where we compare. And I noticed someone, Scott's just mentioned even doing a Venn diagram of comparison. Exactly, that could be an extension activity for writing. We might just orally start with those sentence starters. Ce qui est similaire est elle a une mère et moi j'ai une mère, par exemple. Ou elle aime danser, mais ce qui est différent, je n'aime pas danser, je préfère jouer au sport, par exemple. So it's a good way then to extend to a speaking activity, but we're reusing those structures that they've heard. And that's a great way to interweave those strands. We get speaking, we get some writing, we get some reading. And so that writing connection might be them writing a short passage about themselves. It might be doing a Venn diagram where they're just doing some sentences. So that's a way to do that connection of the strands. This is a great way to support learners with language acquisition, because we're giving them a model of the language. They're getting the input from hearing, what they see, what's written. And it also is going to create some sentence starters for learners who need a spot to start. So then they can then use those sentence starters and maybe switch out information that applies to them or to write about themselves. Is this a unit or a one-day activity? It's going to depend on the length of time that you have with your students. We chose this listening activity as an activity within a larger unit where we want students to be able to talk about themselves. So there would be other things that would be happening before they get to that point. But this activity might take place if you've got the students for a shorter time. You might be doing this over more than one period to be able to fit all of these things in. Great. Okay, 10-2. So I think we'll move on to the next slide because we're getting close to the end, and I know Jordan wants a chance to speak at the end too. Another important piece of post-listening is the supporting learners with metacognition and goal setting. And when we mentioned at the beginning that all students won't listen in the same way or understand in the same way, having space and providing opportunities to talk about the strategies they used helps the individual learner, but it also helps other learners to hear the different things that people are trying so that they can start to use those strategies and see if it works for them. So some ways that you can do that are just listed on the side. It's also helpful. I know the person that mentioned keep staying in French, sometimes to have some of those sentence starters there to help students to be able to talk about their learning is helpful. So you could do something like asking students to list the listening strategies they used in order of effectiveness for the task. So then they might say, well, I used, I listened for keywords, I used the images, and they would decide just by that higher level of thinking, decide what was more effective for them, would start to help them maybe see some patterns in their learning of what strategies are working. It also helps learners to see the strategies that work in different contexts. So whether they're listening to a podcast, whether they're listening in a conversation, whether they're listening to a video, all of those different areas where we listen, then they can start to see some of those patterns and understand how they learn. And then if we can support them in setting a goal for themselves, then that can help them take ownership for their learning and see where that will go. There's lots more details on this in the module. We don't have time to go into every single thing, but if that's something that you're interested in, you can check it out.
And now we're going to do a bit of a sharing session. So on this slide, we've just listed some possible resources that could be used for listening. And of course, just note that when looking at the content in different resources, always make sure you keep in mind the consideration that we discussed previously to make sure that the resource is appropriate and is culturally diverse, and it represents various identities also. So I'm just going to ask now if there's anyone in the chat who has any ideas of any listening resources or activities even that they let you, just for a little bit of a share from everyone. So that's what we're just going to ask right now.
Oh,
Oui, la francomobile.
That one I don't know, so I'm going to add it to my list. I noticed there's a question too about a copy of the slide deck. All of the things that we've referenced tonight are in the module and in the viewer's guide. All of the links are there. So if you're asking in reference to all of these resources, they're all linked in the viewer's guide.
Yes.
Oh, another podcast there.
Oh, cool.
And I know someone mentioned cost. All of these do not cost anything because there are websites that we can go to. The thing that I like about TV 5 Monde, for instance, is they have the CFR level, so that can sometimes help. And I'm noticing a question about the resource. We could put that, Annette, do you want to put that playlist that you had in the chat for the one that Kate's video was from that series?
Sure, I will go put that playlist in there now.
Okay, just to
Yes, ils ont ton âge, oui.
The module is available on our website, and it also was posted on the virtual summit. And I'll maybe put that in the chat after once Jordan's talking, because you can access it there as well. So lots of great ideas. Maybe what we can do is compile the chat notes and add these in so that we've got all these great suggestions. Thank you so much. Okay, so one last thing that we wanted to talk about. In our module, we talk about assessment as well with listening, and we also talk about differentiated instruction. So we just wanted to call back to that and mention a few points. But again, in the module, we go into a bit more detail about this. In the example that we modeled, we were showing some different ways that you could scaffold the learning, and that's really important for the gradual release of responsibility model that helps support learners. And just considering that some learners may need more time to process or recall info with the language. So using things like repetition or reformulating their oral language for learners can help them to have that time to process. Providing visual supports using images, sentence starters, manipulatives, word wall, all of those things will help support learners that need different supports to help them process. We can also provide alternative ways for learners to show their understanding. Often listening traditionally has been done in the way of Write down the specific details that you hear, but there's lots of other ways that students can show their understanding by drawing that doesn't require the written output if they don't have all the vocabulary. Having them use objects to show their understanding. So just thinking about some different ways, being creative in the ways that they do it. And yes, you can slow down the speed too, because sometimes, or listening more than one time can help as well. So just thinking about some of those different ways that we can differentiate to support listening for our learners. We can also choose different content, even though the topic might be the same, but we can choose different videos depending on where our learners are at, which can also be a useful thing. And then just thinking about what are we asking of students? What we want is for them to have a global understanding and be able to have that confidence with listening. So if it's presented if we're always collecting evidence of their learning in the form of a test, that might not be the best way to inspire that confidence. If we're giving them opportunities to talk about what they heard and that interaction, that will help to build their confidence to feel like they are starting to make meaning of what they're hearing. I think we're almost at the end of time.
I think so. And just in time too.
So thank you for your participation and all the great ideas that you've shared in the chat and for joining us. I'm seeing the time. We might have time for a couple questions. I hope that we've answered the questions that have come in. And then I know Jordan also wanted to finish up with. Okay.
Just added it in the chat. So if you have a moment to give us some feedback on this module, this webinar, and what you enjoyed and what we can do to provide some future PD, PL opportunities, that would be fantastic. Also, the conversation continues on Twitter. So that'll keep going for the next little while. So join us and share, something you learned tonight, and that would be great. So thank you to Annette and Amy. I'm going to turn off the recording right now and leave everything else live. So if you do want to chat with Annette and Amy, you've got a few moments to do that. So thank you all for coming and have a great evening.
Okay, and I'm seeing a few questions about the slide deck.